Good afternoon, everybody. It's noon Pacific, which means it's time for content chat. And today we have one of my favorite topics, which is personalization. And of course, if we're going to be talking about personalization, there is literally only one person in the content marketing world that I want to be having this conversation with. And we are lucky because she is here today. We have Zontee Hou with us. And Zontee, please take a minute to introduce yourself and maybe flash your book a little bit because I
Oh,
am so
sure.
excited about this.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Erica, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you. My name is Zontee Hou, and I'm the managing director of Convince and Convert. We are a consultancy. You may have heard of our founder, Jay Baer. We focus on content marketing strategy, digital marketing strategy, social media strategy for some of the world's best brands. I am also the author of Data-Driven Personalization, which is a new book that just came out a couple of weeks ago from Kogan Page. It is all about how to use consumer insights to generate customer loyalty, why marketers need to have a seat at the data table, and how to build your data-driven personalization strategy.
I love it because, I have been beating the drum around how personalization can really improve customer experience and loyalty for the past few years. But realistically, I think it was 2000 that I was at an IABC conference and saw Peppers and Rogers. They had just released their book on one-to-one marketing. And here we are 24 years later. And finally, it feels like the technology has caught up with what we want to do as marketers. So, and I mean, it's about time because it feels like consumers have had those expectations and have really expected to have that know you experience because they know we have all this data about all of our interactions. So I think maybe that's a good place to start. What customer expectations are currently around the personalization that they expect because of all that data that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're exactly right. It has taken us at least 20 something years to catch up just from a technology standpoint and from, quite frankly, a utilization standpoint, right? When I worked at my first job out of college, this was a company where this was the early 2000s, and they had actually had an email newsletter since 1998. So they actually had a good amount of information that they had captured. But, in the early 2000s, the amount of information that we could leverage was pretty limited. We felt
Yeah.
pretty sophisticated doing automations and just, a little bit of information about your anniversary date with this company or your birthday, things like that. And that already actually gave us quite a bump when it came to sales because people felt so special being recognized.
Yeah.
So we knew that there was a lot of power in this kind of highly personalized messaging. We actually did custom research for the book. And what we found interviewing or surveying more than 1,000 US adults was that 88% of US adults expect that brands are going to interact with them based on the shared experience that they've had together, right? So whatever past experiences they've had with the brand should shape the future marketing that they get from the brand. 85% of them believe that personalization is really important from a recommendation standpoint, that they want brands to actually help them get more out of their experience with the brands by actually sharing with them specific product recommendations, content recommendations, usage tips, etc., based on the things that they are actually doing with the brand. That's their expectation. They believe that that is going to help them save time, save energy, get more quality experience with the brand. But when we asked marketers about, are you collecting enough data? Less than half said, yes, I'm collecting enough data. And I'm just going to tell you that the folks who said, yes, I'm collecting enough data, I don't actually believe them, right? Like they think they're collecting enough data. I promise you, if you actually ask them, can you deliver on all of these expectations of the customers? They probably can't.
Yeah.
And even the brands that have a lot of data, oftentimes they're struggling with things like how do we unify our data so that we have one holistic picture of the customer? How do we make sure that we're using that in a way that respects privacy but gives people a better experience? And honestly, just how do we use our budget in the right place so we're delivering on personalization across the right platforms? So there's still a lot that we have to figure out as a marketing community. But I think that the key takeaway here is that, in fact, the expectations of consumers is extremely high for that more personalized one-to-one experience with brands. They believe that it is high time that they have contextual experiences with brands. And the question that I often get from folks is, well, I'm in the B2B space. That's the expectation on the B2C side, but like nobody's doing that well in my space. Or I'm in finance and nobody does it well in my space. Or I'm in healthcare, nobody does it well in my space. And I'm like, none of that matters. You are looking at your competition as just the other brands in your space. But the expectations of consumers are not shaped by your competitive set. They are shaped by their experiences across all different brands. And the people that you are competing for when it comes to the expectations around personalization are Amazon, are Netflix, are Nike, all these brands that are actually doing a good job of taking that information and turning it into something that makes the experience of the consumer one that's more seamless and, quite frankly, easy.
Yeah. And it's interesting too because, when I think about those kinds of objections, which I've certainly heard a ton over my career too, being mostly B2B and spending a lot of time in financial services, I think back about, but what were the really amazing experiences I had as a B2B buyer? And there are things like when Alan Gannett was running Track Maven, and he sent my office gluten-free cupcakes to celebrate our signing the contract, and these kinds of little things that were very personal that he didn't get from click through data. He got it from brain data and paying attention and seeing what was out there. Like those little things start to build the, hey, they really get me and they understand who my team is. And that's just so impactful, and it has nothing to do with the B2B versus B2C. It's just about, are you paying attention and using all of those data points that you're getting about your people from all the sources? I mean, you have a customer relationship management tool. Are you using it? Are you putting things useful into it so you can have those really great kinds of interactions?
100%. I love that you share that example. Shout out to Track Maven and their adorable corgi mascot. Um, you identify something important, which is that oftentimes we think about data as these technologically driven data points. But in fact, when I use the word data and how I approach it in my book is really talking about information, right? All of the different information that you are collecting about your customers across all of the different places that they engage with you. And that does include um, your sales team interacting with people. That includes your customer service team interacting with people. That includes point of sales, where you have a lot of opportunities to really take down key information about your customers. I mean, back in the day, you would go to a department store and you would have a personal shopper, and they would have a booklet that they kept a file of you and your taste needs, and then they
Yeah.
could make recommendations next time you came around. And there are digital brands that are doing that, right? A Stitch Fix, things like that. And they use those personal interactions of actual chat with a customer service agent to help collect that information. But it's the capturing of that information and then the using of it for future interactions and engagements with the customer that really improves the experience. So people go, yes, they really understood what it is that I needed and what makes my experience more valuable to me. In the book, I actually share an example of a small business, Methodical Coffee. They're out of South Carolina. They are a coffee roaster. They create beautiful coffee roasts with wonderful flavor profiles. And they sell direct to consumer, but they also have real cafes. And one of the things that you will experience if you go into one of their real cafes and talk to a person within the store who's actually helping you select your coffee is they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions about your preferences. And when they ring you up, they're going to capture that information in your profile. So the next time you order from them, whether it's online or in the store, they can say, hey, these are the things you liked last time. We've actually got a new blend that's in that same kind of category. Do you want to give that a shot? Right. But if they don't capture that, then they can't use that for future experiences. And you, the person who went in last time, had a great experience, come in, you don't want to have to start from square one, right? You don't want to be like,
Exactly.
so what are your flavor profile taste and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, I spent 5 minutes explaining this to somebody last time. Can you just tell me based on the things I bought the last time what I would like, and they're like, "Ooh, we don't have that information." Like, that's a pain. No, none of us want that, right? So it's, I think, our responsibility to think about what is that holistic profile building that we can do. I think we have to treat it as a relationship. And like you said, most of us have a CRM in place. How are you actually seeding that CRM with the information that helps your team deliver a really great experience? That is actually a strategic decision when it comes to what data to collect, right? People always ask me, well, do we just collect everything and anything? And it's like, of course not. That's not useful for your team. How much stuff do you want to actually have to sort through? But if you're deliberate in figuring out what are the things that would really make a difference in our customers' shopping experience, their buying experience, their usage experience, their ongoing relationship with us, you can start to identify those places where you can capture information that really helps them to get more out of their relationship. And particularly for a content marketing side, again, there's a lot of opportunities to educate, right? Methodical Coffee actually does a ton of education to their customers where, again, many of us, me included, don't know that much about coffee, but we like flavors of different kinds, and they're doing a lot of education. But they actually figure out, like, what are your goals out of this, right? Coffee nerds don't need you to explain like single origin coffees. They already know that. They don't want you to explain that to them. That feels kind of condescending to them, right? They already have
Yep.
this information. But somebody might like me where I'm like, I don't really know that much about coffee. I would love for you to explain to me, like, what are the different origins? How does that impact the profiles? Why does that matter to me? How could I shop for a friend? And so I think even understanding what their learning goals are can be a really powerful part of that data collection process.
And it's all about, as Carmen Hill noted, putting the personal in personalization. And that definitely resonates, with your consumer and with marketers because it's a lot more engaging and interesting when you can start thinking through how you can do that. So I think we're all pretty aware of how data can be used to personalize ads because we all get those ads all the time that are based on things that we've purchased. But let's, really just kind of hone in on content marketing because, to date, a lot of content marketing has been maybe targeted to a persona or, very loosely personalized. Like there are, some providers, some vendors that let you do custom ABM landing pages, but it's really just been in that sales context. So I'd love to hear, if you're wanting to implement it in the content marketing context, what data you really need to make sure that you have to be starting out well.
Absolutely. I think that in the previous example, I shared this idea of learning goals, right? Making it easy for your audience to say, these are the things that I'm trying to research, trying to learn about, etc., allows you to make better recommendations. Oftentimes in the content marketing space, we're trying to recommend, here's the next resource that might be useful to you. Also, what's the learning path that is helpful to you to achieve those specific goals? And I think that we can do a lot of that now, not only through the recommendations engines, right, or algorithms that are serving this personalized content selection to our customers, but also there are many more tools now available that actually customize headlines and even body copy and the selection of content to the customers. And that is something that I think has been more heavily adapted on the lead generation or sales side, but a lot of the tools actually are available in a content marketing capacity. And I think that that's particularly valuable for the B2B space where we have these long lead cycles where education is such a key part of it, right? You want somebody to come to a content landing page and get the information that really helps them get the most out of the experience. But then you need to capture what it is that they actually engage with, because that, again, tells you more about what's the next stage that they should take with your brand. So I often am recommending to our clients that you are not only using that feedback to give recommendations for content, but also then tailor the next thing that they actually receive from you as a set of recommendations or a resource, right? And I think that can be done at scale now, again, through a lot of these automated tools where, you may say, come into a content marketing page, it gives you some resources, and then you're asked maybe a series of 2 or 3 questions. What are the things that you're trying to achieve? Do you want more resources and blah, 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 blah? What would make your experience with these resources better? The next thing that it spits out is maybe a custom PDF or learning path or even a course that's sent to you that says, hey, here's a thing that we built for you based on your goals. I think that would make the experience for your audience much more seamless, right?
Mhm.
It makes sure that they actually are more likely to use the resources that you've provided. And it gives them an assurance and trust in your brand that you actually care about their goals and that you can do something about their goals. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities. Tools like Persado, like Optimizely, like Mutiny, they're able to, again, deliver this not only on the web experience, but you can actually integrate this into your email experience so that, again, people can get customized messages back specific to them. And I think we should take some of these things into the content marketing approach because, again, there's so much trust that needs to be built between your customers and you now more than ever, especially on the B2B side with these long lead cycles.
Totally. So, of course, getting from having the data, that's kind of the first hurdle. But then the next hurdle is, oh my gosh, we have so much data. How on earth can we, learn anything from this data? How do we get the insights we need
Yeah.
in order to, know how we can even start
Yeah.
personalizing? So I'd love to hear, some of the tools, methodologies, or frameworks that you use to go from the, oh my gosh, we have this huge collection of first party data, which also, yay, but to go from there to being able to actually personalize.
Yeah, I love this question because it actually really comes down to culture. I have a whole section of the book that's focused on the idea of building a culture of curiosity where everybody within your organization is empowered to identify useful hypotheses that you want to learn out of the data. This cannot just live inside, we have one data analyst or we have a market research team, because oftentimes those are not the people who are actually engaging with the customers on a regular basis. And therefore, they don't really have a good picture of what's valuable to that customer and how marketing actually happens. That's why it's so important for marketing to have a seat at this data table. So that's the first thing, is to have a culture of curiosity where all the different members of your team are really empowered to think through what are those key questions that if we could answer, we would be able to deliver a more valuable experience, we would be able to create more useful content, we would be able to build trust and a stronger relationship with our customers. The next thing is, once you have those hypotheses, to make sure that you've got the tools in place that actually allow the team to act upon that information and pull it out. And there, I think, again, we're at a moment right now where we suddenly have the ability to query our data much more easily than ever before and much more cost effectively. And I'll give you an example. Back in the early 2000s, Charles Duhigg of the New York Times Magazine wrote about how the team at Target, the marketing team, came to the data analytics team and said, what if you could identify pregnant women in the first trimester before anybody has really said, hey, I'm pregnant?
Yeah.
Because most women don't announce it publicly. They don't really sign up for lists in the first trimester. But if they win them in the first trimester, it forms a habit that then lasts their lifetime, right? So they asked the data analytics team this question. The data analytics team, it took them about 6 months and 8 different people, to run a lot of different scenarios and pull together a data set that said, these are the likely behaviors that indicate that somebody is pregnant, but they have not actually signed up for any lists yet. It was things like going to unscented lotion, switching certain products out, suddenly stopping buying other products, right? Stuff like that really indicated this person is probably in early pregnancy. What was interesting to me about it was so effective. They were actually sending marketing messages to people whose families didn't even know they were pregnant yet, who had not actually made any kind of an announcement. And so they kind of fell in that uncanny valley, which is another topic that we could talk about,
And I
where
think
they had to pull back a little
they
bit.
got sued by one dad who was mad because he found out that his teenage daughter was pregnant because
Yeah.
of the, postcard in the mail from Target.
Yeah, I don't think they were sued, but he did go in and angrily confront the Target manager, who then received an apology another week later when he found
Yeah,
that in fact it was true. Um, but that's the uncanny valley. And again,
yeah,
I would talk about the balance between personalization and privacy later for sure. But what I think is very powerful about this example is it took so much effort in 2002 to come up with this profile.
yeah,
Now with AI and machine learning, if you have a tool layered on top of your data lake, it would have been very easy for the Target team today to say, pull us a segment of all of our customers who have announced that they are pregnant. Okay, we've got that segment. Tell us in the 9 months ago, or I guess you might want to say like 6, 8 months ago, what were they buying? What were the through lines there, right? And then they could have that data profile. And then
yeah.
they could say, tell us of our customers now who is shopping in this way and exhibiting these behaviors. That's 3 queries in an AI driven machine learning tool, where because the large language model can parse what it is that you're asking, can just pull you out those segmentations. And then you have a segment ready to go to say, okay, now we've got that. That's a rule running forward. And every time people exhibit these behaviors, we're going to send them these postcards, these email messages, these resources, etc. That could be going on forever. And I think that that's a very exciting moment for us to be in, where it's actually very inexpensive for us to do these things. Even smaller teams can layer Claude or a paid subscription to ChatGPT on top of their data and start to ask some of these questions. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not, right? But it is easier than ever before. And what I want to demonstrate is that between that and the more purpose-built tools to help you process data, we can make it simpler for our team to have these great hypotheses and then get the information they need to do something about it. But that still means that you need people with great hypotheses who feel empowered to say, hey, what if we could do this, right? It was the marketing team at Target who said, if we could capture our customers earlier than the competition, we would win in this baby category, right? The pregnancy, infancy category. And because we could win there, we would be able to build a loyal group of people who then want to shop with us for the rest of their pregnancies. I mean, I'm among them. When my child was born, we continued to shop at Target because it was a convenient thing, and we built that habit, right?
Yeah.
I share in one of my talks this story, and then I share as the visual an influencer named Paige, who loved Target so much she did her second pregnancy photo shoot announcement inside a Target. That's how much she loved Target, guys.
That's so
That's
cute. I love it.
powerful, right? So you want to build that kind of customer passion and loyalty and excitement, and that takes showing up for them in a way that they go, gosh, it's so easy for me to work with these guys. I can't even think about working with anybody else.
A big part of that, though, is, coming to folks with the right message, because, when they haven't explicitly told you that they're pregnant, you wanna have, like, a message that's still kind of like, "Hey, so you might want some of these nice vitamins," as opposed to, "Hey, congrats on your pregnancy," really, bright and
100%.
loud. Because especially in the first trimester, you don't wanna, people aren't saying it loud and proud because they're concerned that
Of
maybe,
course.
it won't go further. So how do you go from having these insights and having that, hypotheses and being like, all right, I think this is going to be an area we can personalize. Like, how do you then get to the coming up with the right kind of message,
Absolutely.
using that data?
Yeah, I think it's really about the balance of personalization and privacy, right? First of all, the things that you are providing have to be highly relevant to the person. You have to be transparent with how you are using your data so that the customer understands we're collecting this data in order to give you a better experience, to personalize the content that you're getting, make sure that you are not wasting your time with stuff that you don't want to see. Telling that story actually can be part of the marketing message that builds trust with your customers. A recent study from PwC showed that the vast majority of people actually are willing to share their data with companies when they understand that the personalization that they're getting is actually benefiting them. So I think being really clear about that. For brands that are doing things like Target, where they're in that kind of sensitive space, Target took the tack of not explicitly messaging. Once they realized they were upsetting people with
Yeah.
the explicit messages, they said, hey, again, we're just going to offer you a variety of things, some of which 60% of those things will be related to the topic of pregnancy, but 40% won't be. So it just feels like you're being shown a variety of things that might be interesting to you. And again, those interests can be other things. And so for the person receiving it, they go, okay, there's some things about my gardening, there's some things about my eating, there's some things about hats for summer. It's okay. It's just a wide variety of things that I might enjoy, right? So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is actually identifying where do we actually want to be sensitive to our customers to give them the ability to opt in and out of certain information. So in the book, I share the example of brands like Levi's, K Jewelers, and a couple of others who actually have proactively asked customers to opt out of Mother's Day messaging or Father's Day messaging because those might be sensitive times of year for certain people,
Yeah.
right? And they're saying, hey, we know that these are places where we don't want to upset our customers. We don't want to trigger you. We don't want you to feel like you're forced to participate in something that you don't want to have information on. So let's just actually make that part of our experience and say to them, these are things that you can opt out of. And I think that that's a very smart and thoughtful way to think about what it is that we do with data as marketers, right? The example that I often share is you guys may remember a couple of years ago, by which I probably mean close to 10, but time is passing in a way that I cannot really understand anymore. Um, when Meta or Facebook at the time finally lifted the curtain and allowed you to actually see what categories you were being targeted for, and
Mhm.
you, the user, could start to opt out of them or remove certain categories entirely, block certain categories, just understand what they were targeting you for. And I had some friends who said, oh, I went in there and I removed myself from everything. And it was interesting to me because I felt like I wouldn't want to remove myself from everything because I wouldn't want to get a whole bunch of ads then that are completely nonsensical and
Yeah.
completely unrelated to me. I think that makes my experience worse. But I did go in there and remove some categories that I felt like were in there because maybe I had been doing research honestly on a client, because when you're in
Yeah.
the digital marketing space, you spend a lot of time on people's websites, and suddenly I was getting ads for all sorts of weird things and recommendations for
Places
content
you
that I
don't
didn't care
live
about.
and
Yeah, exactly. So that was helpful to be able to remove. This was before I had a child. So, I'd been shopping for my godson and I thought, well, I don't need any more recommendations for kids stuff. It doesn't serve my life. So, remove that. And it allowed me to actually tailor my experience so that it was better on those platforms. And again, when you think about how much content and advertising Meta is serving to you at any given time, it does make a difference to be able to say, yes, this, no, that, yes, this, no, that. And honestly, it's better for Meta because you're more likely to spend time on the platform if you feel like they are serving you things that you want to engage with. I think that we sometimes think if we give people the choice, they'll just say no to everything. But again, if you're transparent about why you need this information and that you want to make the experience better for them, you want to give them content that is more likely to serve their needs, I actually think that oftentimes people will make the decision to be thoughtful and say, this actually makes my experience better with this company overall. Um, Another company that I talk a lot about in the book is Nike. Nike has done a great job of creating all of these different touch points within their ecosystem for you to engage with content, not just their products, right? So if you're a sneakerhead, they have a sneakers app where you can just learn about other collectibles or how people customize their sneakers. If you are a runner, of course, you've got Nike Run Club or Nike Training Club if you like CrossFit, right? And on all of those platforms, you're getting great content, learning about different kinds of exercises, learning about different creators, getting tips, getting information, etc. But also, Nike is learning what kinds of things people tend to engage with, how often they're engaging with them, and they're also identifying trends ahead of time, right? So they can see that, oh, it looks like a lot of people are starting to take bar classes. We should probably have more bar products, right? And they can be on top of these trends in a real world scenario like that because they actually have data from their community that gives them that kind of heads up. And so I think, if you identify different places for your content to essentially become a two-way experience for your customers, you're also collecting data about what content should you be creating more of, right? And I think that that's very powerful.
I agree. And, I'm actually thrilled when I'm on Facebook and it asks me, hey, do you want to see more content like this based on something, an action that I've taken? And I always say yes or no. And especially if it's like cute dogs, I'm like, oh, yes, yes, please, more cute dog videos, more cute cat videos. That's exactly why I'm on Facebook. And I do that because I only have so much time in the day. I want it to show me content from the friends that I want to keep up with. And I buy things when they show me something that's just perfect. I've bought all sorts of things recently, in fact, because Facebook has, served up an ad for something. I'm like, oh yeah, I totally want that.
Yeah,
Both from brands I've already known or from brands that were completely new to me. So
absolutely.
can be incredibly powerful. But I do wish more brands were like Amazon in that everything that you purchase from Amazon, you can actually choose whether or not Amazon uses that to tailor content or to make product recommendations. And you can say no. So that way, when you're buying gifts for the whole family, that it doesn't mean that then all of a sudden you get weird recommendations for things that you absolutely do not want and that you just, you are buying your father in law or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I'm hopeful that the technology will get to a place where we allow more people to have that control because, it's in the brand's best interest, in my opinion, which I think is aligned with you. Because if they really do love your company and they are having a great experience, they'll customize. They won't just opt out of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of us probably went through that period when Netflix streaming started becoming a big thing that we would go in and we would upvote the videos or films that we liked and downvote the things that we didn't like because it gave us a better set of recommendations. And when I go
Yeah.
on to Netflix, it wastes less of my time because I don't have to search. I hate that mindless scroll when you go on to Netflix and you're like, oof, what do I want to watch? Then you're scrolling and you're scrolling and you're scrolling. You want that first set of things to be stuff that you would consider because it wastes less of your time.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important. To your Amazon example, they even allow you to remove searches that you've done from your history if you don't want them to use it. And I think that that is really helpful because, again, sometimes you're doing research for your friend who's over and you're like, oh, let me look up that thing for you. Well, I'm not going to buy that thing. I already have that thing or I have something similar. So I
Yeah.
just it doesn't matter. I don't want to see that recommended to me again, right?
Yeah.
It's a better experience. Now, the thing is, I do think a lot of brands should educate their customers better about the ability to tailor and customize their experience, right? Because you and I have noticed these things, but probably there are a lot of people who actually never realized that they could take themselves out of certain kinds of products or
Yeah.
whatnot. And that would actually improve their experience. So I think that for all of us, we're in a moment where the possibilities of personalization are greater than ever before, but we should not assume that our customers understand. And that's why I do think that the education piece of it is really important, bringing them along when it comes to how you're using the data and then transparency about what kinds of data are collected. I think that's really important.
Well, I mean, that, is a great segue into talking about the data privacy in a little, in a kind of more meaningful way, because we have a lot of information about all of our consumers, about all of our customers. And, increasingly, there are competing, regulations across the globe and even across the US. And I'm surprised how many marketers don't understand or were unaware of like the California privacy laws or the New York privacy laws. Because I'm still going to websites that just push cookies without asking. Yet that's in violation of just even within the US with privacy regulations in multiple states.
For sure. I think that first of all marketers have to prepare for a cookieless future, that's a technology that unfortunately is not going to make a lot of sense in the longer run. We're being pushed more towards this environment where to really own customer data, you have to have some kind of a sign-in membership experience. Now, on one hand, that's a little bit annoying for your audience because now they have to sign into yet another thing. But as we saw with the example with Nike, right? If you're actually offering them a lot of value to be in your environment and to experience the things that you can customize and offer to them specifically, there's a good reason for them to say, you know what, yes, I am going to log in. Or again, let's think about an experience like YouTube. When I'm logged into YouTube, the recommendations for content are extremely accurate. They do
Yeah,
a great job of figuring out what I'm going to be interested in, honestly, even at different times of day, right? During the day, it pushes more content to me that has to do with my B2B interests because it knows that's what
so
I'm
you're
more
going to look
likely to
at during
click
the
at.
day.
Yeah. And then in the evenings, I get an awful lot of late night show recommendations. It's a different set of recommendations. And I think that that is very powerful. This idea that you are making it easier for me to get to what I want to get to whenever I want to get to it. So I think that brands across the spectrum will have good reasons or can have good reasons to have people in that logged in environment. One of the small business examples that I share in the book is Rosenfeld Media. I advise them, and they are a UX publishing house. They put out beautiful books, and they also do a ton of great events throughout the year that are specific to the UX community, the user research community, and the product management community. And one of the things that they've recently introduced is a membership experience because when you are logged in, you can get access to a ton of their free content. And that allows you to discover talks, articles, podcasts with a ton of different uh, people who are experts within that community, and it makes it really easy for you to browse that content. But you're also able to get the book recommendations from them. You're also able to get article recommendations from them. And if you're a paid member, you can even use their AI chatbot, which allows you to ask questions, and it actually gives you responses as well as citations from their universe. So you're not just
That's so
being
cool.
spit out information, right? It's actually saying, like, this information is from this author, and this is the original thing if you want to learn more about that thing. And I think that that's very powerful because it's almost a more curated, personalized experience of learning, right? Like, if I want to learn more about becoming a product manager, what are the resources that I should be exploring? Who are the people that I should be learning from? What are their top tips? And they're giving you that. But again, it's not a large language model generated thing where it's sort of rehashed, remixed, right? It's actually saying, here are three people that you should be learning from, and this is what they're telling you. And I think that's a
That's
great
amazing.
example of
Yeah.
content marketing that is highly personalized because it's leveraging this technology. What a cool opportunity for all of us, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? Is so much better than, having stuff just kind of being randomly suggested to you, because especially like you and I, we've been doing content marketing for a very long time, and yet we still get the occasional upstart company sending us "Oh, you're doing it wrong," or "You're new to content marketing." And you're like, "Oh, sweet summer child, you have your data wrong." So it's just always so nice to see when people get it right. Um,
100%.
but of course, it always is fun though to talk about when we don't get it right. So I'd love if we can talk about, some of the mistakes that you do see with people maybe making assumptions from their data, or even just some of the mistakes people make when trying to get the data or get that buy-in from people in the first place.
Sure.
Because I think, we've worked with enough folks that, you probably have some what not to do examples.
Sure. Well, I think to exactly what you were talking about of the cold email that says, "Hey, you seem like you're new to content marketing," and you're like, "Wow, did you do any cursory research in order to at least validate this one statement before you sent me an email?" I just got one the other day that was like, "You seem like somebody who should have a podcast." And I'm like,
I
I've
got that email too.
I've been podcasting since 2007. I currently have a podcast series that just started publishing a couple of weeks ago. It's called Data-Driven Decisions. If you would like to listen, it's very, very interesting. We've got cool guests who are all talking about data with me. But, I'm literally right now doing a podcast and I'm getting this email and I'm like, oh, I feel like you could have just done a Google search for that before you sent me that email. But the point being that I think there is a high level of expectations about what information is collected. Sometimes you don't have that information to start with. But again, if you're going to start a relationship with the customers, you need to actually go out and get that information so that you can make sure that first touch point is right, particularly in the B2B space where, again, like the expectations are high. On the B2C side, as well as the B2B side, I also think that the thing that people get wrong is that they don't realize they can just ask the customer what it is that they want, need, what their goals are, etc. In fact, that's my biggest piece of advice oftentimes for brands is figure out how, as part of your onboarding experience, you can just ask them the questions that help to identify what their needs are. So of course, in the B2B space, we experience a lot of onboarding. You would think that they would capture that data, but oftentimes the person who onboards and the people who are actually building your marketing profile are different people, or they don't have it organized together, and so they don't do that. But there are brands like Cole Haan, the shoe brand, who, when you set up an account on their website, they ask you a whole bunch of questions about how you use their products so that they can understand what's going to be helpful to you in the future. The brand Noom, which is a health app, they have a very robust onboarding survey that allows you to define your goals and say what matters to you, say what your triggers are, say what you like, what you don't like. That's a really great onboarding experience. We've worked with uh, many different organizations over the years on attitudinal research to understand what are their customer segments. And one of the things that I tell them is use the customer segments as a point within your automations, email automations, where people can say which of the segments I belong to. Because honestly, your customers love to define themselves. We like to say, I'm a this, I'm a Cancer, I'm not a Leo. Like those are things that people want to call out. And the assumption that marketers make is, ooh, we can't like reveal the secret sauce. No, tell the customers. We think these are the profiles that make the most sense. Which one are you? In the coffee example I shared earlier, they had created 3 segments, and they found that it's very, very easy for their audience to say, ooh, I'm a that, and it helps them with their marketing. One of our Convince and Convert clients was Texas X's, which is the largest alumni association in the U.S., and they are associated with the University of Texas. We did this attitudinal research. We defined 3 archetypes who spanned age, right? So you had people who were 25 who would be in A, B, or C, or you had people who were 60 in A, B, and C. So it was really driven by the way they saw the university's relationship with them and how they wanted to engage with that community and legacy, etc. Once we figured that out, we said this should be a part of the experience of every person who becomes a Texas X. They should be asked, which one are you? It's as simple as that. You're immediately collecting information about them and you're actually improving their experience. Don't be afraid to ask your customers, what do they want? Because I think they actually want to tell you. That's why they're out here, is to solve some kind of a problem or address some kind of a need. Ask them what they want.
Because we want to be part of a peer cohort. We don't want to receive a bunch of content that doesn't, meet us where we are and doesn't reflect who we are. As you can see from my office, I'm a perky goth. It's equal parts dark and mysterious and Hello Kitty.
I
That's a
love it.
thing. It's a very specific segment. Oh, and you know what? Your Text X example, Carmen's one. She gets all the emails, so she's, been seeing that in action. I love it.
Awesome. I love it.
See, and I will tell you, I'm an alumni of San Diego State. And San Diego, of course, being where Content Marketing World is going to be this year, so I'm psyched to get to go back. Um, they do a pretty terrible job. I've never responded to any of their alumni stuff because none of it really spoke to me. They're not talking to me about the fact that I was, part of the journalism program. They're not talking to me about like, is there a Northern California cohort? They're just not using the data that I know they have, that I'm positive they have. It's a bummer.
It's a great point. I was just at the Meltwater Summit, and I gave a panel to the higher education space. And I think that from a marketing perspective, it's a space that is rich in data, but unfortunately, you don't see a lot of universities really tailoring that experience for alumni based on the things that they know about what you actually did at that college or university. And I think that's a shame, right? Because we all have affiliations when it comes to that space, that time in our lives, right? Were
Yep,
you a theater kid or an orchestra kid? Were you a sports kid? You had a ton of different organizations you belonged to. I was like a student government kid, right? I think that the fact that I do get invitations to student government, like alumni things from NYU, it makes me happy because I'm like, yeah, I still feel that way on the inside a little bit, right? So,
totally.
you want to be acknowledged for who you are. And I think ultimately that's what personalization is about. Your audience, your customer, your prospective customer wants to be seen for who they are, what they need, what they uniquely, individually have as goals. If you can deliver on that and you can make that experience more relevant to them, they'll be happier and they'll stick around longer and want to spend more money with you.
100%. And if you don't, if you're sending those alumni folks messages about it being homecoming weekend and come watch football, it's like, dude, I didn't watch any football when I was going to school. So why on earth would I care about that now? It's like, you got to do better, because
Same.
that's our expectation. If you've got to do better than that. But to that end, I know a lot of folks struggle because they're like, but we have a small budget, or even, we have a big budget, but we have to go through a horrible, rigorous process with our IT to make sure that it meets all of our security requirements. So to that, I would love it if you could share some of the tools and platforms that you've been using to help your clients with content personalization, to kind of give an overview of places where people can start and some of the vendors that they really should be looking at.
Sure. Before I answer that question, I'm
Mhm.
I'm going to address the kind of bigger issue that you bring up, which is how to make the case
Yeah.
to take on data-driven personalization as a strategic initiative when it comes to marketing. Because I think within a lot of organizations, the reason that you don't have the dollars, right, is it's hard to explain exactly why we should be investing in this particular space. In the book, I talk a lot about this idea of making sure that we're speaking in the language of business outcomes, and particularly customer lifetime value, right? There are only three levers that you can really push when it comes to your audience. You can grow the audience, you can get the people that you have right now to spend more with you, or you can increase the length of their lifetime so that the amount of time that they're spending money with you increases, right? Or ideally, you're pushing more than one of these things, right? But because of that, you can very easily start to identify the tangible places where personalization plays a role, right? Throughout this conversation, we've talked about the ways that a more personalized experience will increase the value that you provide to your existing customers, making them more valuable. It increases the lifetime by making sure that they are sticking with you for longer and or become a great referral source for other people who might have similar problems. It also allows you to better identify people for whom you are highly relevant so that you can bring more of them into the fold. So there are really specific pathways to each of these different business objectives. And I think that if we can make a stronger case within our organization of, hey, if we ran a pilot program and we can push this lever and demonstrate that we can create more value for our organization within this particular space, then let us have more budget to do more in this particular space, then I think that we can win people over. This kind of an approach to marketing is easy to connect the dots from that measurement perspective, maybe more so than some of the other parts of what we do when it comes to things like content marketing, right? Because oftentimes content marketing, we're either really early in the funnel, or if we're mid or lower funnel, it's difficult to say how much the content is actually impacting the decision-making process. But I think if we can start to be more deliberate in building these measurement touch points for our organizations, we can better explain to people how we're moving the needle. So once we're doing that, then you have the ability to say, okay, we want these different tools in place that help us do more interesting things when it comes to not only personalization, but I think just identifying the different touch points that really make a difference to our customers. I mentioned earlier, but some of the tools that I think are really interesting, both because they're doing good personalization, but also because they're leveraging some AI tools, include Optimizely, which is of course known as an experimentation platform, but has some really great personalization tools that they've rolled out, and they're making it easier for you to curate and deliver a more personalized experience on your website. Again, that's content as well as leads and sales. Persado is also doing some really interesting things. They are using what they call Motivation AI, an AI tool that is pulling in a lot of third-party data into the tool and then allowing you to serve recommendations and content and messaging based on your owned data as well as third-party data. Mutiny is another tool that's doing things that are very interesting in that space. That's a B2B only tool. They are particularly, I think, good at leveraging third-party data that helps you to better understand the needs of your particular audience. And again, I think in the B2B space, oftentimes we need that third-party data because we don't have enough existing within our own house. And so by pulling that in, we're making it easier. And then I also really recommend that people think through, again, what is your stack when it comes to analysis? There are, again, a variety of tools now that are sitting on top of data layers, and I think that that's very important. Even my friends at Meltwater, they're doing some really interesting things when it comes to using AI, et cetera, to help you from a research standpoint. Now, again, that's not integrated into your content engine, but I think that it can help you to better understand your audience so that you can create more relevant content as a starting point. And then, like I said, I'm really encouraging brands of all different industries to really think about how could they leverage the large language models, et cetera, to create these custom incidences that actually deliver a more relevant website experience to your customers and pull your content resources into one place. I mentioned the higher education space. One of the things that are, it's kind of one of my dreams, but I have not yet had a customer implement this yet, is, you know as well as I do, when you go onto any higher education website, university or college, every single one of them is formatted differently. You never know how they're organized. It's very hard to figure out, like, what information do you need for a particular program, or what's the curriculum, how do you build a schedule? There's so much information that you need. None of them are organized the same. And my dream would be that you go on and there's a chat GPT type of interface where you can ask it these questions and it just pulls the resource for you and says, you will need to buy these 5 books for blah, blah, blah class, and here's the link to the full, syllabus or something like that. Because it would save everybody a lot of hassle to have it pointed out to you rather than for you to go hunting down for it. And you go through the rigmarole and it doesn't even pull the right version of the thing for you. It's like an archived version that they
Outdated
forgot to take down.
syllabus and
Yes. We've all had that experience at some point in our lives. For me, it's been probably 10 years since I was in grad school, but there were a lot of things that I couldn't find easily, and I would love for my school to have provided that kind of easy delivery mechanism for the content that they do have and the resources that they have that I want, but I don't want to have to figure out how to hunt down. It's one of the reasons why people keep asking, well, why is Google a gatekeeper to the internet? It's because they made it easier to find the things that you are actually looking for. It's too difficult for us as individuals to figure out how to pull those things out. I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm an avid New York Times reader. I'm one of those people who has paid for a subscription forever because I believe in the quality, the caliber of the content. But
Same.
their search engine is junk. And if
Yep.
I want to find a specific article that I saw somebody reference somewhere, I still go to Google and I type in the information and I type in site colon New York Times and I let it pull it out for
I
me.
do that too.
And I think that that demonstrates, Erica, you and I having the same experience, that there's a lot of people for whom like our ideal content experience isn't lower quality content. We want high quality content. We want to find it more easily and we want it delivered to us in a way that helps us get more value out of it at the moment that we need it.
Yep.
So that to me is the biggest content opportunity to is actually think about what is the discovery mechanism for my content? How do we make it easier for people to find us?
And people are spending so much time thinking about how can I use AI to, create more content instead of thinking through how can I use AI to deliver to people exactly what they're looking for, exactly how they want it. We should have all of those personalized pathways for finding content. We shouldn't have the expectation that some, UI UX person has the one vision for how every person, regardless of their goals, should go through a website, because we're all different. We all process information differently. We all want to do something differently, yet we have so much information that's just coming through the exact same interface for everybody, and we can do better.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We all even ask questions in a completely different way, right? That's what I like about the Chat GPT of the world, right? Is you can express yourself however you want, and it's still going to give a result that makes sense because it's interpreting the language. If we gave our audience the power, then I think we also solve an issue that oftentimes people hear ask me about, which is from a content perspective, when it comes to AI, how do we not erode the expertise element of it, the human element of it, right? And my point of view is let humans be the experts. Let ChatGPT and AI, et cetera, be a delivery partner, right? Let it help you find the things, but don't let it be the thing that's creating the expertise. It doesn't know anything.
Exactly. And we all know that there's a lot of wrong information on the internet. And, the AI is basically like that toddler going out there and grabbing information. And if you're not giving it the right guardrails and you're not sure where the data, came from that it's using to make those assumptions, you can get some very bad or wrong ideas or generic ideas. And
Absolutely.
none of us wake up in the morning and say, let's create some really great generic content that's going to make me happy and it's going to make us rich, right? No,
Absolutely.
no one says that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that again, from that personalization perspective, your audience would love to get more recommendations based on that past experience. So if you gave them that interface and it took into consideration how they have engaged with your resource before, that would make it even more valuable. The truth is that we're entering a time period when the internet is more and more fragmented because there is this issue of trust. We have circles of trust. Again, I trust the New York Times, so I'm going to read their website. I'm going to read Wirecutter. I'm going to read, their recipes because for me, the New York Times is a certain level of content, right? You need to build the reputation for being a trusted resource. But then once people are inside your specific space, you need to make sure it is easy for them to find the great resources you are actually providing in a way that is highly relevant to them. So if you had that chat history and you were making recommendations based on what I've searched before and what kinds of articles or videos or podcasts or whatever I've engaged with before, then that makes me get more value out of the content you're creating.
The first website that just doesn't show me things made with flour, because, I have a wheat allergy and gluten
Mhm,
free. Like the
mhm.
first website that just remembers that and
Yes,
goes with it is going to be like my best friend and my go-to source for recipes and for, shopping. Cause it feels mean when, a
absolutely.
site, shows me something I can't have. I'm like, yeah, I wish I would love that. It just, it feels bad.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
nobody wants to make their customers feel bad, do they?
That's an excellent point too, right? Is that in the end, your customers are people with emotional drivers. And, we talked a little bit about these missteps when it comes to personalization. And I do think one of them is this idea of using what should be available data to make sure that people are having a good, positive experience and not feeling bad. Because once they feel bad, it is very hard to fix that ick.
Exactly. Well, I don't think there's been any ick in our conversation. I think you've given folks so much food for thought. So if they want even more on this topic, though, where can they get your book? Where can they connect with you?
Absolutely. Of course, you can always learn about the fantastic content that we're putting out at Convince and Convert on convinceandconvert.com. Again, please check out the podcast, check out our fantastic blog, check out our other flagship podcast, Social Pros, and the team does an excellent job there. You can learn more about the book Data-Driven Personalization wherever books are sold. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can, of course, find it on the publisher website, koganpage.com/data-driven personalization. And I'll even share a quick code for all of you folks. ZHData20 will get you 20% off your purchase, and you will even get free shipping if you're in the US or the UK. So do definitely check that out. And I would just say that you can always find me on LinkedIn or at zontehou.com. And I love to have chats with fantastic people like you, Erika. So, reach out anytime. And thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks so much for sharing everything with us. And we'll be back again next week. Bye, everybody.